Tuesday, October 16th, 1962. President Kennedy is shown these aerial photos of the Cuban landscape. To an untrained eye, they reveal no secrets, just stretches of harmless topography. But intelligence experts know better. Thus, the start of 13 days of crisis that bring the two superpowers to the edge of World War III, the closest the world has ever come to nuclear war. The Soviet leaders' move to install those missiles in the Western Hemisphere came after a series of foreign policy debacles for Kennedy. After the Bay of Pigs came the Vienna summit. Khrushchev was convinced that Kennedy was weak, indecisive, that he could bully the young president into submission on a number of key issues. And Kennedy was, in fact, badly shaken by that meeting. He came away with the conviction that Khrushchev was determined to test him. And the first test came in the summer of 1961. Khrushchev was turning up the heat to force the Allies out of West Berlin.
I hear it said that West Berlin is militarily untenable. And so was Bastogne, and so in fact was Stalingrad. Any dangerous spot is tenable if men, brave men, will make it so. We cannot and will not permit the communists to drive us out of Berlin, either gradually or by force.
In August, Khrushchev backed away. Instead, he ordered the building of a wall to seal off the people of East Berlin from any contact with the West. And that Berlin Wall became the symbol of the East-West confrontation for decades to come. He was looking for a way to force the Americans into a move that would give the Soviets an excuse to seize West Berlin. For his part in Havana, Castro feared another U.S. invasion was coming.
Only an alternative was left for them: direct invasion against Cuba. And that danger, in our opinion, existed in a real manner. And this was behind the decision to set the strategic missiles in Cuba.
So finally, as the summer of 1962 was ending, Khrushchev's brazen move to install nuclear weapons on America's doorstep brought the Cold War to a boil. The first reports were sketchy from anti-Castro Cubans that Russian ships had carried intermediate-range missiles to Cuba. Administration officials were skeptical. They assumed any missiles in Cuba were defensive weapons, surface-to-air missiles, weapons that would pose no threat to the U.S. mainland. Nonetheless, Kennedy ordered reconnaissance flights, and the U-2s over Cuba brought back evidence that confirmed the administration's worst fears. The launching sites were for offensive missiles that could fire nuclear warheads at American cities as far away as Montana. The administration was stunned. Tuesday, October 16th, 1962, day one of the 13 days of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The president is shown the photographs. Kennedy immediately forms a select group of 15 advisors to help him decide how to respond. For days, they are the only Americans who know how grave the situation is. The first order of business, to lay out the options, which range from a diplomatic protest to a full-scale invasion of Cuba. Day two, Wednesday, October 17th, intense discussions. The consensus clearly moves toward airstrikes to destroy the missile sites. But Robert Kennedy has deep reservations. In a private note to his brother, the Attorney General says, "I now know how Tojo felt when he was planning Pearl Harbor." Day three, Thursday, October 18th. McNamara comes up with an alternative, a naval blockade of Cuba. Soviet ships bound for Cuba would be stopped and searched. Any with offensive weapons would not be permitted to pass. So they decide on a blockade. Day four, Friday, October 19th. The veil of secrecy is beginning to wear thin. The Washington press corps has picked up enough signals to know that some kind of trouble is brewing. Too many high-ranking officials have been spending too much time away from their normal duties. Kennedy decides he cannot wait any longer. He approves the quarantine. Days 5 and 6, Saturday and Sunday, October 20th and 21st. Navy and Air Force units are put on full alert. The secret phase of the crisis is over. Kennedy is now ready to break the news to an unsuspecting public. Day 7, Monday, October 22nd. John Kennedy's address is the most somber speech by an American president since Franklin Roosevelt summoned the nation to war after Pearl Harbor.
A strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, where they're found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back. It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union.
For the first 13 hours after the speech, there is no response of any kind from Moscow. And when they finally do react, it is with a perfunctory note to the American ambassador accusing the United States of piracy. It contains no threat of military action, no warning that Soviet ships intend to run the blockade. Kennedy shortens the line of interception for the quarantine from 800 miles to 500 miles. The idea is to give Khrushchev more time to decide what to do.
Are there nuclear warheads on the island?
In view of the fact that we know and have identified substantial numbers of missiles that can only operate with nuclear warheads, it's fair to assume such warheads are on the island.